Well, our next performer will be Eve Johnson. Wait, let's say a little more about Eve, though. Eve is, she's been performing at our open mic for the last 3 years in a row. And this is your last semester, Eve, right? Yeah. Yay, she's graduating. And we're very, very proud of Eve. And this is a nice send-off for her from Queensboro ASAP. So let's give a round of applause for Eve.
So I'm going to read you all a story that was published in the most recent Communique paper. It's a short story of mine, and there's a warning above it. The following story contains strong language and violence that some people may find offensive, so I'm just letting you all know. And I'm not crazy. I don't need psychological help. I just write like this. Most people live their lives in a daze. They wake up without ever waking up. They eat without ever tasting the food. They work without ever really caring. They fuck without ever really feeling. They love without ever understanding. Most people miss out on life, Rain said as she was kicked in the face, slamming against the cement wall. She felt warm liquid sliding down her head. She licked her lips in anticipation for more. It was always more she was seeking. Her life had become a game in which the object was freedom, the obstacle was life, and the salvation was death. You're weak, she shouted, blowing her bangs out of her face. Everything was dark. She was positive she blacked out a few times, but she could not be sure. Wherever he took her, it was someplace underground where no one would hear her cries, the last cries of a dismal life. That's all you've got? She shouted, or tried to, since standing up was a difficult feat. Finally, she was able to stand using the wall for support. She shut her eyes and shoved her body into him full force. She could not see his face, but she heard a low growl from him, very human and very pathetic. You're weak, you're pathetic, you're not a man. Rain kept pushing him, smacking him, punching him, scratching him, but he was like the cement wall. He would not budge. She just got angrier. Then her anger turned into fear. She was afraid he'd bail out on their deal, and then she would have to find someone else to help her. No, it had to be now. It had to be in this hour. It had to be in this moment. This was her time to shine, and she would shine so red. I thought you were going to help me, she shouted and spat in his face, or what she assumed was his face. This seemed to stir some life within his stone body. He punched her hard in the face. Her jaw was in pain, and she spat out a tooth. Bastard, piece of shit, she yelled. He began choking her. She clawed her nails in his skin. She kicked at his legs. This was not part of the deal. The deal had certain ritualistic guidelines to it. He was deviating. How could she complain, really? The end result was the same. Her suffering, though, wouldn't be as long as she'd hoped. Still, this was not how she wanted to die. But then he let her go, and she gasped. Her throat hurt, and the oxygen made her feel high, higher than she already was. You're crazy. Why are we doing this? He said, his voice pained. Marvin knew this was wrong, and if caught, he'd possibly go to prison again for a very long time. As Rain sucked in air, she stared in the direction of her savior. She knew from the moment she walked into the bar and spotted him that he would be the one to rescue her, to save her from her pitiable existence. Be my savior, she heard the words in her head. I thought you were going to help me, she shouted. Look, I'm sorry. I'm real messed up right now, and you're crazy. I don't even know what I'm doing, he slurred slightly. It was all true. He was very messed up in the biggest sense of the word. High on cocaine and drunk. She began crying quietly. Her savior could not back down. Maybe in the moments before salvation, you beg. So she begged. She struggled to her knees to feel his hard body. She felt his strong legs and thighs and hesitated before moving her hands roughly over his hidden manhood. She used him to draw herself upward, and he helped her by pulling her arms. Her jaw was in excruciating pain, as was her head, but she softly kissed this man's face and neck. I was a convicted criminal. I did my time, but I've never hit a woman before. You're sick. He hugged her close to his body. He kept speaking, though he no longer had any idea what exactly it was he was saying. He thought of Yvonne, his beautiful dead sister. This girl looked just like her, though her eyes were simply blue and her hair much longer and darker. If her hair were shorter and curlier, he might have thought she was his sister in the bar. When she walked in, she took his breath away. Physically, she and Yvonne shared similar features, but the eyes convinced him to help her. Her expression reminded him of Yvonne's expression the last time he saw her, totally broken, yet totally determined. What is your name? She whispered in her savior's ear. She softly flicked her tongue on his ear to taste the sweat of the man who would grant her salvation. Marvin, he said. Tell me, Marvin, have you killed before? She asked. That is what I did time for. Who did you kill? She slowly nibbled on his neck, swaying against his body to music only the dead can hear. This was her time to shine. My bastard stepfather. He began to sob, sucking in air quickly through his nostrils. He drove my sister to insanity, basically murdered her. The judge never understood. The jury never cared. Rain stopped nibbling on his neck and grabbed his face with her hands. She kissed him, and it was a painful kiss, filled with blood, tears, and sweat. Her jaw was in so much pain, it was beautiful. Oh, Marvin, she paused for dramatic effect. Your sister was just a stupid whore. He pushed her. What did you say? His voice thundered in this dark place. She was just a silly whore. She had it coming. Rain began to laugh, really laugh. She was so high, she didn't know his dead sister, but she felt so good. Death would be hers. This was her time to shine, bitch. He punched her. Yes, she laughed again. Your stupid sister deserved everything that happened to her. Tell me, Marvin, did he push her down the stairs or put a bullet in her head? He punched her jaw, and she cried out in pain, beautiful, blissful pain. Shut up. She could hear the tears in his hard voice. She could feel the rage emanating from his body. She couldn't stop smiling. His rage would help her. He was her savior, and he was filled with an all-consuming, bloody rage. Oh, yes, she shouted as he punched her repeatedly. She laughed while he kicked her in the stomach. I hope she died a horrible death. Those are the best ones, she said. He grabbed her by the hair and began banging her head into the ground. Yes, she sighed the word. Her life was slowly ebbing away. She remembered the last few moments of meeting Marvin. She thought back to how she walked into the empty bar and saw him. She knew without knowing that tonight would be her night. Most girls look forward to their prom or their wedding day, but not Rain. Her salvation was death, and Marvin would save her. He had bought her a drink, then another drink, then another drink. The way he stared at her, she knew he would agree to anything she said. Before she knew it, her head was swimming with alcohol, and so was his. He took her to his car, where he prepared 2 clean needles for the cocaine he would inject into himself and into her. What the hell, who cares? Tonight was her night. By some divine hand, her savior was delivered to her, Marvin, a convicted killer and coke addict. Be my savior. She had spoken the words to seal her fate, and he, her savior, had agreed. She never knew why he agreed and didn't really care. All she cared about was getting what she wanted, a painful death, something she could be proud of. She wanted to be saved from her hard life of foster homes, prostitution, drugs, and most of all, her own mind. In turn, Marvin thought this girl was completely insane, yet the look in her eyes was so much like Yvonne. He had always wanted to help Yvonne. He had wished a million times for time to go backwards so he could be there for his sister. Seeing the determination in this girl's eyes, he made up his mind. He would help his sister through this troubled girl. Rain brought herself back to the present time. She could no longer taunt him or move a limb because she was so badly beaten, so bloody. She was half leaning on the wall and half lying on the hard floor. She heard him walk unsteadily, and then she heard heavy things being moved. She smiled and breathed in her last few painful breaths. She wished she could see the art he had made out of her. She wished she could see the colorful bruises and the crimson red on her skin. She was shining. This was her time. Any last words? He said through clenched teeth. She opened her eyes to see his dark silhouette holding something heavy on his shoulder. Once again, she smiled. This was her time to shine, and she would shine so red, finally.
Keep your applause for Eve Johnson.